morning. I will send out the slides afterwards, but I didn't really do the thing where I just put all the info on the slides because I think that's not a very good use of your time. But I will send out the slides afterwards if you want access to those so you can have the pictures and those kinds of things as well. We are going to get started here in about 30 seconds. If you are a paper note taker, you are a person after my own heart. Paper note taking is just objectively the superior form of note taking. But whatever form of note taking you are, make sure that you are ready to take some notes. We good? All right, so we're going to get started. Here's sort of where we're headed today. So first we're going to talk about the resolution. We're going to talk about IP in the news. I'm going to give you some background on IP, where it comes from, what it is, what we're doing here. We're going to talk about the key concepts in the resolution. We're going to talk about separation of powers and the political aspects of intellectual property. We're going to touch on some likely negative arguments, and then I'll give you a chance to ask questions. So this is sort of where we're headed today. We'll go along, and you can probably follow along as you go, but this is sort of where we are headed. But before we do that, I did want to sort of have a meta comment on topic lecture. So this is like my, 15th topic lecture. I did the one for ND last year. I've done a bunch of them for a variety of camps, and I really like giving the topic lecture, both because it's kind of fun and because it's a really good incentive to like make sure I know some stuff on day one. Because if you're going to have to stand up and tell everybody about it, it's like there's a pressure to do that. But I will say, the concept of the topic lecture in some ways is a little bit silly. And the reason for that is that we are all going to be learning about the topic for the next 2 weeks, and we are going to be continuing to learn about the topic for the entire school year. The thing I think is really cool about policy debate, it's one of my very favorite things about my job, is that I get to learn a whole new subject every single school year, right? So I've been coaching policy debate a very long time, so over those many years I have gotten to learn deeply about a bunch of different issues. To say that on day one we can comprehensively in about 90 minutes cover everything for a topic is both silly and just like it's going for a defeat. Okay. Instead, I want to give you some overviews of the kinds of questions we will be asking about this topic, and I really hope that if you or I or anyone in this room were to give a topic lecture on the last day of the ND, we'd give a really different lecture than the one I'm giving right now, right? Because it means we learned something. And if you were to give a topic lecture to the rest of your team, or the novices on your team, something like that, in March or April, you'd give a totally different topic lecture than I'm giving right now, because again, we have learned some things. So let's dive right in. Here is the 2024-2025 resolution. You can write it down, but the main things to understand is that we're here talking about intellectual property or intellectual property rights in the United States. We're talking about domestic intellectual property rights. What's domestic mean? Yeah, United States. In our country, right? So if we were in Canada, domestic would be Canada. But because we are in the United States and we're talking about the United States federal government, domestic means in the United States. So strengthening protection of domestic intellectual property rights in these three things: copyrights, patents, and trademarks. And we're going to talk about what all of these terms mean. The main thing to understand about the resolution right now is that we have a topic for the entire school year. Every policy debater in the United States and other countries that participate in American policy debate will be debating the same topic for the entire year. Some of you have experience with other formats of debate, so maybe you've dabbled in public forum, or you've done some Lincoln Douglas, or you've done some speech that have different topic setups. But we will be debating this the entire school year. And so if somebody asks you, like, what's the topic? If you come home tonight and your family's like, hey, what did you learn at the ND today? You could be like, well, the topic for this year is about intellectual property. But if somebody says the resolution, they're really referring to this whole phrase, this whole statement. And the affirmative is going to defend that resolution, the negative is going to negate that resolution for the most part, and we will go on from there. But the whole rest of this lecture will be sort of unpacking, well, what does this mean? What do these words mean, and how do they fit in the broader context of like what's going on in the United States right now? And why on earth do we care about this topic is a huge undercurrent of the topic lecture. Is like, why is this the thing that we have selected for thousands of students across the United States to be debating? This entire year you will be debating about intellectual property. That is the topic that has been chosen through a topic process that involves lots and lots and lots of voting and narrowing down to a single topic. And this is what we have and will be debating this year. So first we're going to look at intellectual property in the news, because I think this will give you some context for like what we're talking about here. Because I think, we'll dissect the term intellectual property and like what it literally means in a second. But before we even get to what are the details, like what are the legal terms of intellectual property means and where does it come from, I think it's important to sort of understand like what we're kind of talking about. So this is a intellectual property issue that's in the news. This one is a little bit older. All the other ones are from like this week. But this one's a little bit older. Who knows something about the NCAA and what they have done with name, image, and likeness in sort of like over the last year? Yes, right here.
Well, they don't pay the athletes, right, because they're student athletes.
Yeah, so prior to recent court decisions, athletes don't get paid, right? College athletes, they don't get paid, and they don't, colleges make money off of those athletes, and those athletes do not get paid for their performance. They were considered student athletes. The benefit to them is their education, and so even though they were like also money raisers for the college, right? If you are a basketball player at a major basketball school, you're raising money for the school. They're not considered employees. What has happened with the NCAA rules for name, image, and likeness? What does that mean? Yeah.
It means that they have to pay you if they're going to use your name, image, and likeness. Like if they're going to put you on a T-shirt or like they're going to use your name to advertise for like a car dealership or something, that they have to pay you.
Yeah. So fundamentally, it is a new set of rules about athletes earning money and still staying non-professional athletes. Okay, they are still amateur athletes, but they can earn money on their name. Has anyone seen an ad with a college athlete on it recently? Who's seen an ad with a college athlete? Anybody? There's a bunch of them coming in. Does anybody want to tell me about one of them? Who's seen one? Yeah, tell me. Either one. Go ahead. Caitlin Clark. What does she have now?
State Farm.
Okay, she's got a State Farm ad. I think she's got some shoes coming out. Okay, that is all Caitlin Clark earning money on a form of intellectual property. In this case, it's earning money on her name, her likeness, her image in the media, and she can now earn money on that in a way that she couldn't a couple of years ago. Any other examples? Yeah.
EA College Football 25.
Yeah, tell me about that.
It's a game that has athletes on the cover, and the whole game features different college football players.
Yeah, and those college football players may now, depending on the arrangement that they've made with EA, may now have to be paid if you're going to use their name, if they're going to be in the game. And there's going to be a whole bunch of lawsuits and discussions about like, well, what does it mean to use somebody's name? Well, how close does it have to look to them in order to be their image? And that's something that's happening in the news. Excellent. All right, anyone heard about this one last week? Scarlett Johansson, there was a big kerfuffle in the news. Yeah, tell me about it.
ChatGPT made like a voice mod, and it sounded exactly like her because it was inspired by a movie she was in where she was an AI.
Okay, so Scarlett Johansson is in a movie. Does anybody know what that movie's called? Her. Okay, and she is an AI in the movie. And OpenAI, the company that owns ChatGPT, approached Scarlett Johansson and was like, hey, would you like to be the voice of our new voice assistant in ChatGPT? So ChatGPT can now talk to you. And they were like, hey, Scarlett Johansson, we would really like to work with you and license your voice, like have you do a bunch of recordings, and then we will use your voice in our chat. Then what happened? What did she say?
No.
Yeah, she was like, no thank you, not interested. What happens after that? Well, what happens after that is kind of a question mark. If you're Scarlett Johansson, what do you think happened? Somebody raise their hand. What does Scarlett Johansson allege? Yeah.
They still used her voice.
Yeah, so the OpenAI comes out, the ChatGPT voice comes out, and it sounds like Scarlett Johansson, okay? So if you're Scarlett Johansson, she published a pretty lengthy, like a statement where she said, I said no to this, and it came out, and now like my whole family thinks it's me. Like they are, if you play the ChatGPT, it is indistinguishable from my voice. If you are OpenAI, what's your response to this? Have anybody heard OpenAI's response? It was like, it came a little bit later, yeah.
There are like multiple different voices.
Yeah, so, well, they do use multiple different voices. There is one that sounds like her. What do they say about the one that sounds like her?
It wasn't trained on just her voice.
Yeah, not her, okay? Yes, there's like some similarity. Yes, there's like some, but it's really just a woman's voice that's like a little bit breathy of a woman's voice, and that could really be anybody. And just because Scarlett Johansson is like one of many people who this could sound like, it doesn't mean we use Scarlett Johansson's voice. This is almost certainly going to be a lawsuit, okay? and there is a real controversy about like what it means to use someone's voice or to use someone's likeness, to use someone's essence when you're not actually paying that person. So my guess is that Scarlett Johansson is going to sue OpenAI, and there will be a very, very lengthy court battle about whether it is actually her voice, whether they just happened to pick a voice that like kind of sounds like Scarlett Johansson, what it means that they approached Scarlett Johansson and then she said no. Does that like prove culpability, or does that prove it's no big deal? We don't know. But this all happened this week. Okay, we got another one. This one is intellectual property rights in the U.S.-China Innovation Competition. So this was an article from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, and they had an article a couple weeks ago that came out, a big, long article about the relationship of the United States and China in intellectual property. What does if you are the United States, what do we consistently allege about China and intellectual property? What is our claim?
Stealing it.
Yeah, that China does not do enough to stop particularly copyright infringement, right? If you have ever bought a knockoff purse, or you have ever bought a watch that's like, it's not a Rolex, it's a Roll V or whatever. Those are all examples of what the United States alleges is intellectual property theft. China alleges it's not intellectual property theft and that they have no obligation to, prevent individual concerns about intellectual property. But this article basically says that we're due for a shift in the relationship between the United States and China in innovation based on intellectual property. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. All right, last one. Patents based on traditional knowledge are often biopiracy. This one came out 12 hours ago. A new international treaty will finally combat this. What's biopiracy? If you don't know that word and you have a computer open, feel free to Google it. Yeah, what do you got?
Pirating of medical stuff?
Yeah, you're onto something. You broke it down. You're like piracy, stealing, life. Yeah, what do you got?
I mean, it could be like certain chemical companies don't let you use certain varieties of seeds.
Okay, so it could definitely be related to some of these seed things. Yep.
Patenting plants.
Yeah. So it is based on the idea of a company coming in and patenting a particular kind of plant or a particular kind of medical cure that has often been used by individuals who are living there for generations. And now, you might be someone who's living in a country that now has to pay for something that has been free forever, and your, ethnicity or your group discovered that cure. And so now there's going to be an international treaty to kind of address the question of like, who gets this stuff? Who is in charge of, determining who has access to things, and when do people have to pay for things that a company has tried to patent? So these are just 4 examples. They're all really recent. And you'll notice that several of them intersect artificial intelligence. I think that will be a big part of our topic. It's certainly a big part of what we'll be debating here at the Indy. But it is also, there's relationships between the United States and other countries. There's relationships between the United States and other cultures. And that's sort of what we'll be debating this year. So let's talk about the background in intellectual property. What is property? So property, fundamentally, is an exclusive right of ownership granted by the state. Okay, property is an exclusive right of ownership, and it's granted by the state. It is when the state says, we recognize you as the owner of X item, and if someone else attempts to take X item or use X item in a way that you disagree with, you have a legal remedy to that issue. There's kind of 2 major types of property. Real property is a physical item, okay? Your laptop, that's real property. Your house, if your family owns their house, is real property. Your phone, real property, okay? Those are all, or your pencil, real property. All of those are physical items that can be owned by an individual, right? Intellectual property is not exactly like real property. It is a creation of the mind. And so the thing that is different about intellectual property than other kinds of property is that it's not something that necessarily you can exclude someone else from owning. If I write a cool song, okay, and I put out that song on the internet and you copy that song without paying me, well, it doesn't mean I don't have the song, right? I still have the song, I still have it on my computer, I can still play it whenever I want, But it does mean that maybe I no longer have access to selling the song because you have distributed it for me. So, if you take Econ 101, you take like AP Econ at your school at some point, or you take a college class in economics, they will sort of tell you, they will probably show you a chart like this, that there are kind of 4 different kinds of property, okay? There is rival and non-rival, okay? A rival good means that if I have it, you can't have it, okay? If I have my iPhone, you do not simultaneously also have my iPhone, right? It is a physical item that cannot be in 2 places at once. Non-rivalrous goods are goods where the fact that someone else has it doesn't mean you lose it, right? That's the song I just wrote. That's the poem that I spoke into class and you recorded. If I tell a poem to my lab this afternoon, someone else records that poem and like shares it on, their group chat. I don't know why they're doing that, but if they did, I still have the poem, right? It doesn't take the poem away from me, so it is not rivalrous. Excludable and non-excludable goods have to do with whether the public has access to them. So whether it is possible to prevent someone else from using those goods. So a rival excludable good are things like your house, your car, your phone, your pencil, okay? You are successfully able to prevent other members of the public from using it, and if someone were to take it, you no longer have it, okay? Over here, we have rival goods, meaning if someone has them, someone else doesn't have them, but not really excludable goods. So that's something like a fish stock. If you go and fish on Lake Lanier, I'm not sure I would recommend it, but if you were to go fish on Lake Lanier, it is very difficult to prevent someone else from fishing on Lake Lanier, right? Fish stocks are things that if you have this fish, someone else doesn't have the fish, but it is very difficult to prevent large groups of people from all getting access to the fish. Non-rival goods are what they often call club goods. These are the things you pay for. So cable TV, just because I have cable doesn't mean you don't have cable, right? If I'm watching a show on Netflix, you can also watch that same show. It does not prevent you from watching that show, but we both had to pay for Netflix, okay? It is not free over the air. And then public goods are things like air, or national defense, or streetlights. They're things that are available to everyone, and the fact that I have national defense does not mean you don't have national defense. Because the fact that I am breathing air does not also prevent you from breathing air. Well, what are we talking about intellectual property? In general, intellectual property starts out over here as a public good, right? But the concept of intellectual property is the attempt to move things that would be public goods over into the concept of club goods. And what I mean by that is that it is taking something that could be distributed freely and is non-rivalrous, meaning I can't, me owning it does not mean you don't also own it. And it applies some rules, some legal regulations that limit who has access to it, right? If I were to buy a CD and rip that CD and put it out on the internet, okay, I could theoretically distribute that music to everyone. But what intellectual property says is like, no, Maggie, you don't get to do that. Instead, the only people who get access to that song are the people who purchased that song. You don't just, just because, I have a song and you have a song and we can share the song doesn't mean that you also shouldn't have to pay for that song. So the concept of intellectual property is taking things that would otherwise be a public good and providing legal framework to make them into a club good. So, where does IP law come from? Comes from Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, okay? IP law goes way back to the founding of the United States. You can do some reading about where IP law comes from in European common law. It's kind of interesting. But the main concept to understand is that IP law is really, really, really old, okay? Copyright law came out like very much along the same time as the printing press. Like as soon as we could distribute things, we were like, oh, we gotta like come up with some rules for how we distribute those things. And when the United States was founded, we came up with Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that says, Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Meaning, if you create something, you have the exclusive right to that thing for a certain amount of time. And they've sort of written the reasoning right into that. We'll unpack that in just a second. But the idea is that they have written into the US Constitution that inventors and authors have exclusive rights to what you created. You created a thing, you get to own that thing for a certain period of time. Why did the framers do that? Yeah?
Like it says, the promotion of useful arts.
Okay, promotion of useful arts and sciences. Break that down a little bit. Why does giving access to something promote useful arts and sciences? Yeah?
It incentivizes innovation so that people will make things for profit.
Yeah, so in a capitalist system, we believe that there is a profit motive to do things, and that profit motive comes from the idea that if you create something, you can sell that thing. And so by giving you the exclusive right to sell your thing, you are more likely to create your thing. The idea is that, you know, poets don't just write poems for their own selves, they write them to sell. And musicians don't just create music because it's beautiful and satisfies their soul, they want to sell those things. And so by giving you the exclusive right to those things, then you will have the right to sell them. On the flip side, why is it securing for limited times? Why is it forever? If I write something, why don't I have the right to that forever? If I invent something really cool, why don't I get the right to that forever? Yeah?
Because it limits the ability of other people to improve upon that work if they can't use it and justify it.
That's exactly right. So fundamentally, intellectual property is a balance between encouraging and rewarding inventors and creators. That was our example over here, was we got to incentivize the inventors and the creators to invent and create. But we also don't want one company, one person, one group to have access to that forever, because that will mean that they have a monopoly. What's a monopoly?
Control over the market.
Yeah, one person or one group has control over the entire market on an issue. We don't want that to happen forever. And so the idea is that we want people to build on each other's inventions. We want people to build on each other's creations. And so the best way to do that, according to the framers of the Constitution, is to provide a balance where you get access to your own thing, but only for a limited time. So you get the exclusive right over what you created, but not forever. So, what if there was no IP protection? If intellectual property did not exist as a legal framework, what would happen? If you are someone who argues in favor of intellectual property, yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, if we did not have intellectual property laws, people would be able to create whatever they want and then say this is mine, which will result in a lot of disputes over what is and what is not someone else's, and in turn discourage innovation and capitalism, as you already mentioned, because people will be less inclined to want to invent if their invention too easily be stolen by another person with no actual legal agreement.
Yeah, that is fundamentally the argument for the existence of intellectual property. That we would not do research, we would not create things, and we would not have consistent products if there was no intellectual property. So the argument for patents is generally based on research, okay? Companies wouldn't research new things that may or may not pan out if they didn't get the exclusive right to that product, okay? It is worth taking the gamble on researching the new product because you will have exclusive access to it. But if you didn't have that guaranteed exclusive access, then maybe it's not worth taking that gamble. Maybe it's not worth that at all. Maybe we shouldn't, focus on inventing something new. We should just, keep selling Tylenol because we know Tylenol exists. Yeah.
If it's so easy to have a copyright on intellectual property, can't someone say, I made a song with like 5 notes, and if someone uses those same 5 notes, can't they just make a profit off that?
Yeah, so his question is like, if somebody else, if you have, a 5-note song, and then someone else uses those 5 notes in a row, like, C, D, E, F, G, and there's like another song that uses C, D, E, F, G, how can you not say that that is your song? The answer to that is there's a lot of litigation about it. My guess is that would not be successful, but there is a lot of litigation about it. And when we talk about copyrights in just a second, there's like a big debates over how much constitutes use of another thing. What industry are we talking about when we're talking about like using little snippets? What art form uses lots of snippets? Say what?
Music?
Music, okay. What kind of music?
Like producing beats.
Producing beats, yeah.
Short form content.
Short form content, okay. what kind of music, what's it called if I take a snippet from your music? Sampling, yeah. And what type of music uses a lot of sampling? What types? A lot of rap, a lot of hip hop, yes, sampling. So there was a huge debate about sampling that happened in the early 90s. Some of the songs that were written in the early 90s like don't get played anymore because they would have to pay too much for them, or they are not for sale anymore because of legal battles over what sampling was. There was a court decision over whether a 1 second snippet from someone else's song constitutes, like, do I have to pay you for the 1 second of your song? It was like a 1-note sound, but it was a distinctive sound. And so the person who created the original song is like, that was a distinctive moment in the music, so I should get credit for it. You should have to license it from me. You should have to pay me. And the people who use it are like, it's 1 second, dude. So I believe that the decision there was it's 1 second, that side won. But there's a lot of debates about sampling and what constitutes, how much you have to pay for. So if there's no IP protection in the copyright section, people argue that there would be less creation. That recording artists would not record their things if they didn't think they got exclusive access. They would probably do a lot of live shows, but they probably are not producing like cool CDs. They're probably not producing stuff that goes out on Spotify, okay? Because all of those things are things that could be shared. And there's probably not a lot of movies or TV because those are extremely expensive, and if somebody can just take your movie and, it's like if you make a really cool movie and then all of a sudden everybody can just have that movie, well, why would you make that cool movie? So, there's probably still live sports, but there's probably not a lot of mega hit movies. There's also an argument that there would be less consistency, that products wouldn't be guaranteed. If you go to lunch today and you buy a Coca-Cola, like you go to the vending machine and you're like, I'm gonna buy a Coke, okay, and you get your bottle of Coke, you're pretty sure what that's going to taste like. It's going to taste like every other Coke that you ever had in your life. And you're pretty sure about how much caffeine is in it, you're pretty sure about, we don't know exactly what's in Coke, but we have like a general idea, how much sugar is going to be in it. If IP protection didn't exist, then those products wouldn't be guaranteed. You could go buy a Coke and it could be poison, okay? And that would pretty much suck. Some people argue Coke is poison, but it could be like literal poison. Yeah?
This can actually apply to the drug trade because there's no IP laws for that. As a result, the quality of drugs varies depending on the cartel and also whether or not they have resources to produce cocaine. And so hot batches, when blood seizures occur, and then people have to increase the dosage, and then they get it back normal, and they end up taking too much, etc., they die. As a result, so less consistency can be actually proven in the real world through drug trade. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people who think that we should legalize currently illegal drugs in the United States, and their argument, a big part of their argument is about intellectual property. It's about guaranteeing that you are getting what you have paid for, that you are not getting a different drug than you believe you are getting, okay? That is true for both pharmaceuticals, okay, legal drugs, and it's true for what are currently illegal drugs. Yeah?
I think that you shouldn't legalize it because if you say that you got, let's say fentanyl poisoning is a big thing.
Yep.
But when you buy a drug, you're assuming the risk of it being dangerous eating it.
Yeah, you are. Probably a lot. I mean, there are both sides of this, right? I could easily argue both sides of this. The argument for legalization is that a lot of people die because they take things that they think are one thing and are taking a different thing. Your argument is that they assume that risk by taking it. The argument for the other side is there's no need to assume that risk. So there's, it is an open question. But certainly that is an intellectual property dispute. That is an intellectual property debate. Yeah?
If a product is created beforehand and then someone gets a patent for that same product after the product has already been in production from another company, do they have to cease production on that?
That's a really good question. So we'll talk about patents more in just a second. But the sort of answer to your question is that when you apply for a patent, you generally have to prove that the invention is new. You can't just take something that already exists and prove that it's new. That said, the first company that started producing a cool thing and didn't apply for the patent on it has really made a mistake, okay? They have very much erred by not immediately starting to patent their things. And so we'll look at that in just a second when we get to patents. The flip side, there are also arguments that it would be way better if we did not have this complex legal framework for intellectual property. There are people who argue we would have more access. The reason your drugs are so expensive, the reason that insulin costs thousands of dollars a month for some people, or you're paying thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars for new medicines, is because of intellectual property, right? And so if we had no intellectual property or weaker intellectual property, existing drug prices would drop a lot, right? If you've ever been to the store and you're like, all right, I'm trying to buy some Advil, and you're like, here's the Advil one, and then here's the ibuprofen one, the like CVS brand, and you're like, Advil, $12 for 6 pills. CVS brand, $6 for 6 pills, and you're like, these are the same thing. The reason for that is that intellectual property has expired on Advil, okay? And so we now have generic Advil that you can purchase for a lot cheaper without having to pay for just like the word Advil. You are literally paying for like the brand name. If we reduced intellectual property on drugs, an enormous number of drugs that are currently protected would drop in prices, okay? If you, if anyone has had COVID in the last couple of years, some of you may have taken, if you're at higher risk, you may have taken a drug called Paxlovid or seen the commercial for Paxlovid. Who's seen a Paxlovid commercial? Yeah, it's like their slogan is like, if it's COVID, Paxlovid, okay? In the beginning, Paxlovid, the company who owns it, agreed to distribute that at a very low cost, okay? So like the first year of Paxlovid, if you went to the, you get a prescription for your doctor, you go to the store, and it costs $0, okay? Because they had an agreement with the United States federal government to like distribute it basically at cost. It was like extremely cheap, your insurance covered it, nothing, okay? Now, if you get COVID and your doctor prescribes Paxlovid, it is a much bigger question about how much you're going to pay. I had COVID in February. My doctor was like, okay, you're like a little bit higher risk, so let's give you some Paxlovid. They sent the prescription over to my local CVS inside Target, and the pharmacist called and they were like, just wanted to let you know, your 5-day course of Paxlovid is going to be $1,600. And I was like, I have some follow-up questions, I have some concerns. I had COVID like a year ago and it was free, and they're like, yes. But now, the company that owns Paxlovid actually is enforcing its intellectual property, and they are selling Paxlovid at $1,600. So my choice was like, initially I believe my choice was to, not take this drug or to pay $1,600, which like I'm a teacher, that's a lot of money. As it turns out, there's actually a secret federal program that I'm happy to like just to plug here, which is that it will pay for your Paxlovid, and it's called Paxess. And that was the federal government saying like, yes, company that owns Paxlovid, we agree that you should get $1,600, but the federal government is going to cover it so that people don't die of COVID or whatever. But the point there is that that drug was like way more expensive because that company just got to set the price. It is not that amount of money because it like costs $1,600 to provide me my 10 pills that I needed to take. It costs that much because the company set the price. So many people think that if we had less IP access, governments would start funding research, right? If you got a COVID vaccine, that was in large part government funded. It was like a agreement with the vaccine manufacturers. If you got Moderna or if you got Pfizer, you got a vaccine that was partially funded by the United States federal government, okay? And some nonprofits and a bunch of other things to like get that done. Many people argue that if we had less IP protection, the governments would step in and start funding research. That research would be done by universities, which are mostly doing that research right now. It would be funded by the federal government. And maybe we don't need IP protection in order to encourage people to, to do research. The flip side of that, or expanding on that, continuing that argument, new research would also be distributed really quickly because you would not have to wait for a company to like rev up their marketing machine and convince all of you to buy it. We could just, get access to that drug very cheaply. Yeah?
Would more governments funding research likely more to that, like getting approved for FDA?
Yeah, I don't know. The FDA definitely, like our current Food and Drug Administration process definitely relies on like relationships with companies, like companies submit stuff to the FDA. Would it be faster if it was just the government funding it? It very well might be, but I don't know very much about that. But that would be another benefit if so, for sure. There is also an argument that in the area of copyright, in the area of music that we were talking about, there would be more equitable creation, right? There are a ton of awesome musicians who you have never heard of, not because they're not awesome, but because they don't have like a contract with a large, media company, a major label who distributes them, right? And that relationship with that major label is like very controversial. What did Taylor Swift do with her label in the last year? Yeah, so she created her own and did what to her early albums? Exactly. So Taylor Swift did not own her own music. She had sold the rights to a label who then got to distribute her music and decide what to do with it. Okay? But they only own that specific recording. So Taylor was able to go back, re-record all of her music, release it on her own label, and now, sort of cut out the agency. Now, Taylor Swift can do that because she's like a mega star, okay? Most artists, even really good artists, even medium famous artists, cannot do that, okay? They just can't afford to do it. And so there is an argument that if we had less IP protection, we would, expression would become more diverse. The people that you hear from, the musicians that you hear from, the artists that you hear from, the movies that get made would be very different. We wouldn't just make like the 1300th giant budget Marvel movie. Like your cool documentary might get a lot more play if Marvel's giant marketing budget was not, knocking you out of the way. Last thing, there would probably be fewer large corporations, okay? Coca-Cola might go out of business if anyone could produce exactly Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is kind of a bad example because they actually have like a super secret vault. Has anybody heard of the Coca-Cola vault? And like the Coca-Cola recipe? Yeah. Like Pepsi has tried very hard to make their product taste exactly like Coca-Cola. Does it taste exactly like Coca-Cola? Two thumbs down, okay? It does not. But like the off-brand Cheez-Its, pretty close to a Cheez-It. Okay, we had a family reunion this weekend, and my cousin got whatever the off-brand of Lucky Charms was. Okay, and I assure you, those Lucky Charms tasted like exactly like they were, I don't know, Lucky O's or whatever. Those marshmallows had the exact same styrofoam squeak as like Lucky Charms of my childhood, and it's because those things are not necessarily actually like an amazing product. It's just that Lucky Charms has IP protection over its thing. So products would probably be more local, more hyper-local products, and they would probably have smaller distribution. So who wants what? Who do we think in society, what kinds of groups, and then they overlap for a reason, but who do we think wants weak or no IP protection? If you are somebody who's like, thumbs down to IP, less IP, who are you, what kind of person are you, what kind of role do you have inside? Yeah?
Probably like pirates and people who are active in like piracy and online piracy, digital theft.
Yeah, so people who are into digital theft, they just want to distribute the stuff. They're definitely in favor of weak or no IP protections. Yeah, way back corner.
I think people in the middle would be upcoming entrepreneurs.
Okay, upcoming entrepreneurs, why?
Because they want something similar to like big companies, but I'm sure when they create their design, they don't want someone else to steal.
Yeah, you have hit on sort of the fundamental relationship. Everybody wants low IP protection when they want to use somebody else's thing, and then they want high IP protection once they've created the thing and they want to prevent other people from using it. Yes, right here, green shirt.
So inside of like less major corporations, I guess smaller artists and manufacturers would want less competition so that their product could actually have a chance.
Yeah, that seems right to me for sure. Yes, over there.
Oh, it's just like your general consumer,
Where does the consumer fit?
or weaker no IP protection.
Why?
They benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, you want the stuff. You don't want to pay for that song, okay? You don't want to pay for that, the extra $6 for the Advil. Yes, black shirt right over here. Yes, that's you.
I feel like a lot of AI creators would want like weight in the middle because you would want weaker no IP protections for what you're sourcing your data set from, but strong IP protections for your AI itself.
Yeah, that's 100% true. AI is a fascinating one. We're going to talk about that in more detail over the course of the Institute because that's sort of what the app's about. But whether you want weak or high, strong IP protections really depends on what part of the case you are on and exactly when it is. Yes?
I would argue that for consumers it would be a little bit of both.
Okay, tell me more.
Because they do want consistency in their product. They probably want healthy medicine.
Yeah, you want the Coca-Cola to not poison you. You want the Advil to really be Advil and not a sugar pill for sure. Yeah. Oh, sorry, keep going.
They probably want copies of entertainment, streaming services, which probably would not be as great with weaker IP protections.
Yeah, for sure. A huge reason of why streaming exists, okay, why does Netflix exist as a streaming service and not, what did Netflix start out as? Do you all know? Yeah, they would like mail you DVDs, okay? It was a challenge to, what was the major place you would get movies? Blockbuster, good job. So we had Blockbuster where you'd like walk into the Blockbuster and rent the movie, okay? And then Netflix was like, oh, I got this idea, we will mail you the movies. This was very innovative at the time, okay? What happened to a lot of the movies that Netflix mailed you? What would people do to those movies? They wouldn't necessarily keep them because they would charge you if you kept them.
Copy them.
Yeah, they would pirate them. They would copy them. People would rent a movie, use their computer to copy that onto a new DVD, and then like give that DVD out to all their friends. Part of the reason streaming exists is because companies were like, it is way too easy to copy things. We just need to make it so easy to get access to our thing that people will not bother to copy it, okay? How many of you have ever copied a physical CD? So you've like taken a CD, now ripped it onto your computer, and then burned it onto a new CD. Okay, we got like 4, okay? If I had asked that question in 2005, or if I asked the lab leaders, my guess is it's like 100% of us have done it. And the reason we did that is because Spotify didn't exist, okay? And so it was, or Apple Music, or whatever your music of choice, YouTube, you can't even watch movies on YouTube. All of those things did not exist. And so in order to get access to a thing, it was worth like spending an hour taking the CD, ripping the CD, and then burning it for one of your friends. That was like a multi-hour process. But that was the only way to get low-cost access without having to buy the CD. Was that legal? 2 thumbs down. Not legal, okay? Was it very efficient? Well, compared to going to the store and buying another CD, very efficient. Compared to streaming, not efficient at all. And that's basically why none of you have ever done this. Yeah?
I don't really understand why scientific protections would make it so that products are consistent, because wouldn't the same regulations that make it so like you can't harm others in general apply to making products that you distribute?
Yes, the laws would still apply. But when you buy, I don't know, name a name brand that you might buy.
Advil's go with that.
Okay, we're gonna go with our Advil. When you buy Advil, okay, and it says Advil on the bottle, you know that that was made by, I don't remember who makes Advil, GlaxoSmithKline maybe? Whatever company makes Advil, you know that that is produced by them. I can't be another company that like puts Advil on my bottles because I would get sued by Advil. And so it is the intellectual property that allows you to say Advil is definitely the product that was made by the Advil company. Coca-Cola might be a better example, right? Because it has to do with flavor, okay? I can make another soda, right? I could make my own cool soda. Lots of people make soda at home. It's kind of fun. Lots of people got into that during the pandemic, like making their own mixes of colas, okay? But I can't sell it as Coca-Cola. So when you go to the vending machine and you buy a Coca-Cola, you know you're getting the one from the Coca-Cola company here in Atlanta and not the one from Maggie's house.
Okay, so the consistency between different producers would not.
That's exactly right. Yes, yeah, yes.
I think like going back to like that kind of like service, you know, like Spotify and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I think that like a lot of piracy happened really big because it was a service problem. And whenever the service isn't convenient and whenever it's not easy for people to use, like I think honestly nowadays like piracy is kind of starting to, I'd say, go up a bit more because we just have so many different streaming services nowadays. Whenever everybody would just use like Netflix and Hulu back in the day, that was all you needed.
You're not wrong at all. The further bifurcation of I don't know, if I want to watch The Office, okay? The Office was on Netflix for a really long time, and then Netflix like lost access to The Office for a while. Then I could not watch it. Or there's a show I really like called Sports Night, which was like the guy who made The West Wing, Aaron Sorkin, did a show called Sports Night. It's hilarious. I love Sports Night. I like to watch it every once in a while. Cannot do that anymore without pirating, right? I cannot pay, it is not available on streaming right now. And so all of a sudden, I have not pirated it. I'm not gonna confess to crimes in the topic lecture this morning, and I really have not. But if I wanted to watch it, that would be the way I would have to watch it now. Yeah, for sure. Yes, there is a big how easy is it, and how easy is the alternative for most people when they're deciding whether to violate intellectual property. Yeah.
If there's a point where someone wants to, someone no longer is selling a product, doesn't that become free game?
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated. I'm gonna ask you to ask that question again when we get to the section on trademarks. Can you do that for me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think you all basically got it all. But Upstart industries, when they're starting, they want weak or no IP protection. Non-industrialized or newly industrialized countries don't want to pay for previous products developed by other countries. They want weak or no IP protection, okay? Over here, established industries, big corporations, they generally want stronger IP protection because they're more likely, they establish themselves as more likely to be selling the thing than they are to need to pay for something else, or they have the resources to pay for other people's inventions. They'd rather protect theirs. And wealthy countries generally want more intellectual property protection. The United States wants high intellectual property in general, especially in our relationship with other countries, because we believe we are more likely to be the producer of the thing than the purchaser of the thing. And if you believe you're more likely to invent the thing, then you generally want high IP protection. In the middle, and I'll take those questions in just a second. In the middle, inventors, creators, and artists, as our friend back here said, sometimes they are on the low IP protection side because they want to sample, okay? If you are a rap artist and you want to sample other artists, we don't want to necessarily have to pay huge costs to sample those things. But once you've created your really cool song and it's a hit, you want to be able to exclude other people from having it. Same thing with inventors. If you want to create a new, like a new watch, a new digital watch, you don't necessarily want to have to pay Apple for all of the patents that they have on the Apple Watch, okay? In order to, get your cool product off the ground. But once you have your product, you also don't want other people to immediately copy it. And so it's complicated. Does anybody remember what happened with the Apple Watch like right before Christmas? Yeah, go for it.
They had to stop all the imports.
Yeah, why? They had to stop selling the Apple Watch very briefly. Stores could still sell the ones they had, but Apple had to stop selling, getting them out there. Why? What happened? They got sued, okay? They got sued for a particular type of, so like the Apple Watches, if any of you have an Apple Watch and it has the like heart monitor and like, are you having a heart attack thing built into it? They got sued by the company who believed that they had infringed their patent on a wearable heart monitor technology. And so Apple lost an initial part of the case. They had to pause, the outcome was they had to pause selling the Apple Watch right before Christmas. Thumbs down if you're Apple. And eventually it's like working its way through the courts and probably will involve Apple paying a whole bunch of money but still getting to sell their product. And that's probably where that will land, but it will take another few years. Yes? Yeah, you.
Just a quick question. So would on weak, it would like talking about economic form, so like would communists be like on weak and capitalists would be on strong and then socialism would be in the middle? Or
that's interesting. I'm not totally sure that I would put socialism in the middle there, but I do think you're right that the like capitalism side is more over here and the alternatives to capitalism side are very much over here. We're going to talk about capitalism. That's sort of an undercurrent of this topic. Okay, I've been making a lot of arguments and I've been trying to really consciously like assign those arguments and explain like who thinks these things. It is not something we should just assume that like capitalism good, thus IP good. But you are for sure correct that a capitalist system tends to have much stronger intellectual property, and non-capitalist systems like socialist or communist systems definitely tend to have weaker intellectual property because they literally care less about property, right? Private property either is less existent or non-existent in other systems. And so, yeah, so our concept of intellectual property very much hinges on the idea of capitalism, and that's why it will be a very strong negative argument this year, and we'll talk about it after break. Yeah?
I just want to talk about that note on economic systems. I feel like communism wouldn't have either intellectual property because it belongs to the state, not to any private church whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I think it's more complicated than simply having no IP protections. It would all belong to the state.
Yeah, it might not even have a concept of intellectual property. It's just like the state-owned invention. Yeah.
And then in the case of capitalism, I feel like it's actually a mixed bag because China, as far as it claims to be communist, it's actually fairly capitalist. And it's because of its capitalist initiatives that encourages weak intellectual property laws that way corporations can start up and then create a diversity of innovations and technologies such as the reduced Silicon Valley, the Chinese Silicon Valley. And then more established countries you already wrote down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's complicated for sure. The thing I will say is, in general, people in less power tend to want less intellectual property. And people who have more power, whether that's money or prestige or brand recognition, tend to want more intellectual property. But again, a lot of people are in the middle and it depends on what you're doing. Apple, right, has hundreds of patents on the Apple Watch. They like enforce those patents very emphatically. But like December 7th or whatever day that Apple was told that they had to stop selling the Apple Watch, they were probably pretty pissy pandas about the concept of intellectual property that day. Does that make sense? And so it just sort of depends on what side of each lawsuit you're on. One of the things that's interesting about this topic is that it's not just sort of like clearly aligned factions. Most corporations, most intellectual property disputes are between multiple corporations, okay, because they're the ones with the big pockets, and they will be on opposite sides depending on which case it is. And so it's not simple enough to say like one company like definitely likes IP. There are definitely industries that are more pro-IP than others, but it just sort of depends on where they're at. All right, we're gonna take a break. So come back at, it is 9:57, come back at 10:05. And we will start talking about the specifics of the resolution. Okay, so we have touched on the types of intellectual property, but we have not gone into them in detail. So somebody remind me, what are the 3 kinds of intellectual property that are in the resolution? What's one?
Copyright.
Copyright. What's another one? Patents. One more.
Trademark.
Trademark. All right, so copyrights, patent, and trademarks are in the resolution. Trade secrets is another kind of major intellectual property that is not an affirmative part of the resolution, but may be a negative part of the resolution. Would not surprise me at all if there is a trade secrets counterplan that says we should just sort of use trade secrets for these kinds of things rather than to copyright or patent or protect them through the other types of intellectual property. There are some other kinds of intellectual property as well that are sort of smaller kinds of intellectual property. The name, image, and likeness is kind of your public persona, which is another type of intellectual property. But these are the biggies. If you look up, you just like Google intellectual property, you're going to have some sort of list, and it will definitely include patents, trademarks, and copyrights. It may also include trade secrets. So we're going to break down what those are. We're going to start with copyright because that's what the app we're going to be talking about over the next 2 weeks is going to be about. In some ways, I think patents might be the larger part of the resolution, but TBD. It's an open question. But we're going to start with copyright. So, what is copyright? Okay? Copyright and patents share a similar goal of innovation. The idea is to provide an incentive for creativity and invention. And in the section of copyright, we're really talking about creativity. So copyright is the exclusive right to copy, share, perform publicly, or generate sequels based on a work that you have created or that you have sold the right to, and to allow or not allow others to do that. So if I create a movie, I have the right to allow others to distribute that movie, and I have the right to not allow others to distribute that movie. In the United States, our system of copyright is called a first sale system, meaning it is all about the first sale, okay? So if I buy a physical album, I buy like an album on vinyl, and then I purchase that album, but then now it's sold out, and Johnny Stupek is like, I would really like that album, Maggie. Like, I'm really into that album. Let's say I bought the new Micah Schnabel album, it's really good. And Johnny's like, ooh, I kind of like Micah Schnabel, that could be kind of cool. I can sell my copy to him, okay, for whatever price I want, and I do not have to pay the company that produced the album or Micah Schnabel, because I have produced it, I have purchased it for the amount that they wanted to sell it for, and now I can sell it. This is the reason why libraries exist, okay, because the library is allowed to give away for free something that they have purchased. If there was no first sale doctrine, if you had to constantly pay, library would not exist. Every time you went to the library, you'd have to like pay for that book again. It is also the reason why used books exist or used media exists. You can buy, a used DVD. I don't know how many of you have DVD players, but if you do, you can get DVDs really cheap, okay? People in my neighborhood are just like constantly giving away. There's like, here's a crate of DVDs, who wants them? For the price of free, okay? That is not infringement of copyright because they paid for them in the first place. But first sale is super complicated by digital works. Who has ever used an Apple Music or like a Kindle book, some type of digital media, okay? Who's ever had one disappear? Has anyone ever had one disappear? Yeah, about half of you that use digital media have had something disappear. I have had books on my Kindle that I have purchased with my own money disappear. And I was like, but I thought I owned that. And the answer was, no, Maggie, you did not own that. You were just like paying for the right to borrow it until they lost the license. So that is something that is complicated, because if Apple loses the license to something, even though you paid for it, that song disappears from your library. Yeah?
Yeah, like whenever you buy like digital movies and that kind of stuff, like you don't actually own the movie. With like a DVD, you own the movie in your possession. It's something that you have.
Correct. If I own a DVD and the company loses the license to that DVD, they do not come to my house and like go into my house and take the DVD, right? That would be illegal and like theft. But if I own a copy of the movie Mean Girls on my like original iPad, okay, and Apple loses the right to distribute Mean Girls, that will just disappear from my iPad, even though I paid for it, back in 2004 or whatever. All right, so what is the purpose of copyright? We talked about this. Why do we have copyright?
Incentivize innovation.
Incentivize, not just quite innovation, a particular kind of innovation. Incentivize what? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Creativity.
Creativity, yeah. We're incentivizing innovation, but a particular kind of innovation, not inventions. Not like creating cool new things, like a mousetrap. We are incentivizing the creation of works, okay? We are trying to encourage the dissemination and creation of creative and informative work. One of the things to understand, and this goes into the Taylor Swift thing, is the difference between ideas and expressions, okay? Copyright protects specific expressions of an idea, okay? I can write a book about an orphan kid who discovers that he's a wizard, and he like rides a train and goes to boarding school and finds out he's like a person who needs to save the world. Okay, I can write that book, I can sell that book, I can distribute that book, and I never need to pay anyone for that book, because the protection of the book you're all thinking about is on that book and not on the idea. Okay, and that's a reason why some stories are told thousands of times or thousands of different ways over the years. If you have a story and it's like about a hero, you can kind of predict where the story's going to go. It's like the hero, and then they're going to, have some problems, and then they're going to triumph over adversity, and then, the things are going to go well. There are probably millions of hero stories that have been told over the years, and it is fine to write your own hero story, even one that kind of relies on some of the same tropes as another story. It is not fine to take a copy of Harry Potter, photocopy it, and email it to all of your friends. You will definitely get sued for that. So the idea is that it protects a specific expression of an idea, but not the idea itself. Yes?
So, like, there's no way to copyright, like, ideas in itself. It's just the expression.
Correct.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yep. In the United States, we protect expressions, not ideas. Yes, go ahead.
In my class, we use PDFs of books online. That should be illegal, right?
Probably illegal. Almost certainly illegal. So it's complicated. We have this concept called fair use in the United States that allows some very limited amounts of sharing. So if it was a photocopy of a paragraph of a book, probably okay. A whole chapter, you're probably in trouble. Now, whether your teacher is going to get sued for that, not super likely, okay? Because frankly, your teacher and your school probably does not have very much money, and so the copyright holder would find it not worth it to go after you, but yes, that would be illegal. Yeah?
Doesn't specific cases for educational fair use exist?
They do. They tend to be more limited than your teachers think they are. The National Federation for High Schools did a copyright class that I had to take because I'm like the state rep for Georgia, and so I had to take this like little copyright class online, and it scared the tuchus out of me. It was very terrifying how many times a day that we all violate copyright. You have probably violated copyright multiple times before you got here this morning. If you like got up and you shared a meme, you violated copyright. If you got up and you retweeted something, it's a little complicated because that's in the Twitter or X terms of use. But we violate copyright constantly. And our society that's like based around like sharing a cool thing is technically violating copyright. If I send a picture of my dog, so I got a new dog yesterday, he's really cute, his name is Freddie, and if I share a picture of my dog, if I send that picture of my dog to Becca, and then Becca's like, oh, that's really cute, I'm gonna send that out to the Emory Debate team because he's a really cute dog. Technically, Becca has violated copyright, okay? Because I took a photograph and I did not say, Becca, I am giving you authorization to share my photograph in ways that I have not authorized. Technically, I could be like, Becca, no go. Now, am I going to win a lawsuit? Like, no. None of these things are actually going to get litigated. But technically, I hold copyright over the photo because I took the photo. The moment I took it, I own the copyright. And the moment Becca shares it without asking me, she has violated copyright. Yeah?
What about watermarks? Like if you take a picture and there's a watermark on it?
Yeah, so if you take a picture and there's a watermark on it, that's one way to protect your copyright. That's a way a lot of people protect their copyright, to make it so that you have to pay them. If you've ever gone to like a photo site because you were like trying to put a photo in a presentation or whatever and has like a giant watermark over it, that is their way of saying like, we're going to make it too hard for you to just copy this photo without paying for us. So you would probably pay for it. So holders versus users. Okay, a copyright holder is the creator of that item or the organization they assigned it to. So if I, as a teacher at Woodward Academy, create like a really cool PowerPoint presentation, it is actually not mine. It is almost certainly Woodward Academy's, okay? Because they have employed me, and so if I'm like sitting at Woodward creating something for my class, Woodward Academy owns the copyright on that. But the holder is the creator or the person who's assigned to. Anytime you write an email, you are a copyright holder. Anytime you send a text message, you are technically a copyright holder over that text message. If you take a video and you post that video, you are a copyright holder over that video. Copyright so the holders are the creators. The users are the person who used that copyright assigned to another. So if I, go get this book, I got this book on copyright over here, and if I read you a section of this book out loud, if I like come over here and I'm like, all right, we're gonna have story time, and I read you a paragraph from this book out loud, I am a copyright user, okay? Because the book is copyrighted, and I am using the copyright. Now, is that allowed? Probably, okay? That is probably a legitimate use of the book. But if I photocopy the book and give it to everybody in lab, not thumbs down, not allowed. If I sing a song at open mic night, who's ever gone to karaoke or an open mic night and sang something? Okay, who's willing to tell us what song they sang? Anybody? No, that was too terrifying. All right, what do you got?
Safe as You by Ed Sheeran.
Excellent. Okay, so you at that moment were a copyright user, okay? Because you were using the copyright of someone else. Almost certainly legitimately, okay? Technically you should have to pay for it, but if you do karaoke, they have paid for the rights to have you sing that song for you. If you retweet or share a news article on social media, who's ever you've taken a news article and you've sent it to someone else, just like something, you saw some, almost everybody. You are a copyright user, okay? And whether that's a legitimate or illegitimate use of copyright depends on how you used it, but that is a copyright user. So the holder is the creator, the user is the one who is using a copyright assigned to somebody else. Yes?
What if you go to a concert and pay for the ticket? Can't you record it and distribute it?
Ooh, that's really interesting. Generally, no. People do all the time. I am a fan of it, so it depends on the artist, okay? So I'm a fan of an artist named Jason Isbell, and if I record at his concert, he's awesome. And if I put it up on YouTube, within 12 hours, I will get a message that says, take that video down, because he cares a lot about copyright. He does not want his songs released, okay? On the other hand, there are lots of bands, lots of jam bands, for example, who love when they tape. Drive-By Truckers, which is actually the band that Jason Isbell used to be in, lets people come tape their shows. They have friends that come tape the show, they put it out on the internet, you can listen to the show, it's pretty cool, and those are freely available. Technically that is copyright infringement, but because the Drive-By Truckers are fine with it, it's fine. So if you go, who's ever watched a baseball game? Anybody ever watched a baseball game on TV? Okay, so if you've ever watched a baseball game on TV, at the beginning of the beginning it'll say Major League Baseball does not authorize the use of this programming in any way. You need permission from Major League Baseball to share any images or sound from this broadcast, okay? And the reason they do that is because they are establishing, no, you can't record your TV of a cool hit and then post it on the internet. Now, you personally doing that, are you gonna go to jail for that or get sued for that? Probably not. But might you get a notice from MLB that's hey, that's our thing, take it down? Maybe. All right, so how is copyright established? So copyright exists the moment a work is, quote, fixed in a tangible medium of expression, okay? So if I gave this lecture to you this morning, and we were not recording this lecture, I do not hold copyright over it. Okay? Because it was not fixed in a tangible medium of expression. But the fact that there is a camera here right now, and the camera is recording the lecture, means I have established copyright over the lecture that I am giving. Okay? Same thing is true if I have a poem and I like go to an open mic night and I deliver my poem out loud. Okay? Not copyrighted. But if I write the poem down and then I read the poem on a piece of paper, copyrighted. The idea is that something that is ephemeral, that cannot be, reproduced or repeated, is not copyrighted, but the moment that it is fixed, whether it is written down, it is a drawing, it is a recording, it is a photograph, all of a sudden it is fixed. Okay? So if a famous artist doodles on a napkin during, while they're just like waiting for their food, that is copyrighted. Okay? That is a copyrighted photo that cannot be shared. Now, if you want to enforce your copyright, if you want to, make sure that nobody else can use it, you do need to register your copyright. So if I got mad, so like the Emory University thing is complicated because I'm working for Emory right now, so technically Emory owns the copyright on this topic lecture. But let's say I sent the topic lecture, like this recording that we're making right now, and I sent it to one of you all, okay? And you sent it to your whole debate team, okay? You should do that. I'm thumbs up on that. I will not have any objections to that. But let's say I did have an objection to that. If I wanted to object to that, I would have to go register the topic lecture, even though the copyright was fixed the moment I did it. The moment it was recorded, it is copyrighted. But in order to enforce, like, no, Ben, you cannot share that with your whole debate team, I would need to go register it with the Copyright Office. But the moment it is fixed, it is established. So, how long does copyright protection last? How long does copyright protection last? It is a long time. Okay, copyright is our longest form of fixed time type of intellectual property. We'll talk patents last much less long. Trademarks could last longer, but don't always. But copyright lasts the creator's lifetime plus 70 years. The creator's lifetime plus 70 years, or 95 years if a corporation owns it. So Emory University, which owns this topic lecture, can control for the next 95 years the distribution of the topic lecture. Now, they're going to put it on the internet, they're fine with you using it. But technically, for 95 years they own it. If I write a poem, okay, and I write it down on a piece of paper, and I read to you all the poem in lab this afternoon, that is, I will own the copyright on that poem for my entire lifetime, plus another 70 years. Okay, so like, whenever I die, hopefully not for a while, but let's say I die in like, I don't know, 30 or 40 years, then another 70 years before that copyright expires. Yes?
Let's say Bob creates like a painting.
Yep.
When he dies, he like wills his copyright to a corporation. Would that copyright last for the next 70 years, or would it last for 95 years?
That's a really good question. I'm like 95% sure that it is based on when he created it, the minute it was fixed in the medium. So it would be his lifetime plus 70 years. Because even though he establishes it to a corporation or sells it, you can't just keep selling your copyright to extend it, is basically the idea. So the moment it is fixed, that's when the clock starts on it, rather than, if it's sold down the road. Yes?
So then once the statute of limitations of copyright expires, that it can be reproduced like any untold number of times.
Yep, it can be reproduced any untold number of times. Who knows what the big copyright battle is that just, it's like, this has involved the extension of copyright several times. Congress has had hearings about it. There's a big one. What is it about? Yeah, way in the back.
Is it like Disney?
It is Disney, and what is it about Disney? Mickey Mouse, okay? So,
Steamboat, right?
yeah, so Mickey Mouse, okay, was set to expire on copyright in the early 90s, okay? And the Disney Corporation was like, whoa, 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 whoa. We're about to lose copyright of Mickey Mouse, okay? We really dislike this. And they went to Congress and they were like, excuse me, Congress, we have some concerns. And Congress is like, oh, don't worry, Disney Corp, we will take care of you. And they extended copyright another 20 years. Not just for Mickey Mouse, but for everything, okay? And many people, like this book that I have right here was written in 2015. I read a couple others that were written in like 2017, 2018, 2019. And all of them predicted that in like 2022, 2023, Congress would extend copyright again. Because what was about to expire? Mickey Mouse. What particular Mickey Mouse? Steamboat Willie. Wow, y'all are good at this. Steamboat Willie was about to expire. Okay, so that's the very first Mickey Mouse cartoon. So it's not all of Mickey Mouse that is no longer copyrighted, but Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse, the like original Mickey Mouse. He doesn't have like gloves on. There's like some differences between what you would see now and what you saw in Steamboat Willie. But Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse, when did the copyright expire?
2024.
Yeah, I think it was basically the beginning of 2024. You now have access to Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse. So if you would like to make your own cartoon with Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse, you can do that. And if you want to make your own cartoon with Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse that's like an anti-Disney cartoon, that's like about how Disney Corporation is really terrible, you can do that now. You can use Mickey Mouse, now just the Steamboat Willie version, but you can use Mickey Mouse in whatever way you want because copyright protection has expired on that particular iteration of Mickey Mouse, which is pretty interesting. This was like the big case. There's a bunch of other ones that have recently expired. You can kind of look, if you Google like, characters in the public domain. Winnie the Pooh, I think, also just recently expired. So if you want to make your like own fanfic of Winnie the Pooh and like Tigger, like having a family in Georgia or whatever, you can do that now. And you couldn't do that a few years ago. Yes.
What about like satirical like reproductions of cartoons? Because like I feel like in like SNL or something, there've been like a couple of skits where they use like the likeness and the names of cartoon characters.
For sure. So there are some exceptions to copyright. One of them is for satire. So if you can prove that it is a satirical response, a lot of times that can be a defense against copyright, what would otherwise be a copyright violation. Fair use, we talked about before. There are some limited ability to use it for educational purposes or for criticism purposes, okay? If you are a movie critic, okay, and you have a TV show that's a movie critic TV show, you're going to show little clips of that movie. But you're showing the clip not to, show the movie. You're showing the clip to either criticize or praise the movie. And so showing a limited clip of that movie in order to critique it is allowed generally, but showing the whole movie in order to critique it, meaning like, all right, we're going to now sit here and watch, Tron, and then at the end we'll talk about it, not allowed. So it has to do with the limited purposes. One of the things that's really interesting and has become really difficult is that all of the ways that copyright is enforced, or a lot of the ways that copyright is enforced in the digital realm is through AI, okay? And the AI will they will just like troll YouTube or troll, TikTok and try and find examples of copyright violations, okay? And then you get a takedown notice. The problem with that is that, and YouTube will demonetize your stream. The problem with that is that some people are using those legitimately. Like there are now movie critics who have had their channels demonetized by YouTube because the company has come in and said that's our copyright, and YouTube just demonetizes it immediately and then deals with it later so they don't get sued. And that creates a problem because they were actually using it legitimately, but they don't have the money to fight Disney or whatever on showing those clips. So it's gotten complicated. All right. Yes?
For copyrights, is it like the lifetime like immediately after the copyright is established or registered, or is it like the entire? The rest of their lifetime. Okay. So like if my poem that I read in lab this afternoon, if I write it down, it is all of the rest of my life. So not the life that has occurred before now, but the rest of my life until I die, and then plus 7 years. From registration or established?
From when it was established, but I have to register it if I'm going to enforce it on you. Yeah?
If something's released posthumously, does it just start the 70 years immediately?
That is a good question. I think yes, but don't quote me on that. Yeah?
So if you establish copyright on something,
Yep.
and then there's a violation of that copyright,
Yep.
Are you able to actually enforce it after you register with the federal government?
Yes.
And even if you didn't have it registered?
Yes.
before?
Yes. You get it from the time that it existed. You just have to register it in order to enforce it, but you get it previous to the time you registered it. There's not really any reason to register it until you decide you want to enforce it. All right, so who's in charge of copyright? Well, the Copyright Office is in charge of copyright. This is a part of the Library of Congress in the executive branch of the federal government. We'll look at the parts of the government in just a second. But part of the Library of Congress is this thing called the Copyright Office. The other major player in IP is the US Patent and Trademark Office, the USPTO. The USPTO is huge. The Copyright Office is pretty small compared to the size of the USPTO. So, what's copyrightable? What's not copyrightable? When we started, like when the country started, it was a very small list of things. It was like books and maps and charts. That was what was copyrightable. Movies did not exist. Audio recordings did not exist. Software for surezies did not exist. What is copyrightable has expanded dramatically and probably will continue to expand. But in general, copyrightable is all of these things. I would not necessarily write down the list. I would just kind of like look at the list and be like, okay, I get what we're talking about here. Not copyrightable are things produced by the US government. So if the government produces a report, that is not, there's no copyright on that. And facts. I can't, you know, like the size of the earth. Nobody can copyright the size of the earth. That is a fact. But particular manifestations of that fact, if I create a database of the sizes of all the planets or whatever, then I can copyright that. Yeah?
Can I just take a picture?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free. And again, I'll send out the slides too. So, but yes, you can always take a picture. I guess technically I am saying you can violate my copyright. Yes, go for it. All right, so balance of copyright protection. Going back for a second. Two things that were like big deals in copyright battles over the last like generation-ish. One was search engines, because search engines have to like index stuff in order to tell you where it is on the internet. So that was like a big deal. Is search engines a violation of copyright? And the other giant one was Google Books. Who's ever used a Google Book? Okay, so Google Books was like a huge battle. It took like 20 years to establish that Google Books, which were using snippets, was legitimate. Okay, sorry. So, balance of copyright protection. People who think copyright protection is too weak are generally saying like it's too easy to copy things. Okay, I can make a song and you can immediately copy that onto your computer. If I send it to you as a file, you can send it to anybody you want. Digital world makes things too easy to copyright. People who think it's too small or too strong, are saying that, you know, it's like everybody's just worried about getting sued all the time. Like I took this copyright class and then I was immediately just terrified of everything I do in the classroom. At the time, the school I worked at would like play a song between classes, like as the bell, instead of having the bell ring, they would like play a little snippet of a song. That was like for surezies copyright violation, and the school could have gotten sued for that because that was a public performance of the song. Technically, if like as my students come into class, I like have Spotify on and I like play them a song while we're waiting for class to start, that is officially a copyright violation. So people who think it's too strong are like, whoa, like why are there all these legal rules to we should just let people kind of do stuff? So, some copyright AF ideas. There is one about an AI database that we are going to be talking about that is, how does AI access copyrighted materials in order to create generative AI? So, who's used ChatGPT? Okay, most of you. Who's used ChatGPT or another form of AI like yeah, okay. Most of you have done that. It has trained on a whole bunch of things. If you want to ask an AI to have a conversation with you as someone, it can do that. And it does that by reading those things. So if you, who's got a favorite author? All right, who's your favorite author?
Anna Huang.
Okay, Anna Huang. Okay, so if you wanted to tell ChatGPT to like write you a short story as Anna Huang, it can probably do that. And it's done that by reading all of her books and analyzing the information and then generating its own. Anna Huang is probably kind of pissed about that, like maybe understandably pissed about that. So we'll talk about that. Another one is AI ownership. So can a machine own something that has been created by that machine? Who owns the copyright on what you just generated on ChatGPT? Is that you? Do you own that? Does like OpenAI own that? Who owns something created by a machine? Can a machine own itself? That's a big question. Another one is about deepfakes. Do you own your own likeness? So this is the Scarlett Johansson thing, and a bunch of other things. If I create a movie of one of you, like I use AI to create the image of one of you saying something you don't believe, do you own that? Do I own that? Does the AI own that? That's a battle. Another one is animals. Who's ever seen it's a lot of times it's referred to as the monkey selfie. Has anyone ever seen it? I was going to put it up, but it's a copyright violation, so I didn't. I was trying really hard to avoid violating copyright in my copyright lecture. But there was a big court case about a wildlife photographer who set up a camera, and then a group of primates were like taking pictures of themselves. Okay, they like figured out how to take pictures. And PETA, the animal rights organization, said that the primate should own the copyright, that the photographer, the person who set up the camera shouldn't get to distribute that picture because he didn't take the picture. It's not his picture, it's the animal's picture. Well, there was like a big debate about it. They lost. I think the guy gets to distribute it, but it was kind of complicated. All right, let's talk about patents. I think that patents is probably the most complicated area of the topic. We are going to delve into some stuff about patents, but you could do a 2-hour lecture on just patents, and you could do a 2-month course on just patents, okay? I ordered a book on those legalities of patents, and then the book was this thick, and I was like, cheese and crackers, I do not want to read that whole thing. So I did some good skimming. But the reason that there are patent lawyers and that they make a lot of money in general is because this is really complicated, okay? So I'm going to try and simplify some things, but if you just kind of get the gist of it, that's totally fine. Don't stress about it. So what is a patent? A patent is a state-granted limited monopoly over a product. It is, or an invention. You have to disclose the details in order to get it. So if you want to get a patent, you have to apply at the Patent and Trademark Office, and you have to disclose the details of your thing. You can't just be like, I invented a way for people to fly. Don't ask me any questions. I will be taking no questions. You don't get that patent. But after you disclose the details, if you are granted the patent, you can prevent others from making or selling that product. But patents can also be bought and sold and licensed so that others can use them. So if I have a patent on something, I can sell you that patent, and now you own that patent. That happens a lot. A lot of times when one big tech company buys a small tech company, they're not really interested in the workers, and they're not really interested in anything but owning that patent so that they don't have to pay that small company in perpetuity to use their thing. Okay? So a lot of mergers, or acquisitions really, in the tech field are because of patents. The holder gets the exclusive right to manufacture the thing, to sell the thing, to use the thing, to build on the technology. Patents, and it protects both the physical thing and the idea. So you can't just build your own product along the same lines and be like, I did it myself. It wasn't theirs, I didn't buy theirs. You can't do that. Yeah?
The patent is sold, so say one company sells the patent to another.
Yep.
And the patent expires, can the patent be renewed or technically duplicated?
Once it expires, it is done. But you can modify it a little bit and maybe get another patent, and that's what happens a lot. If you've ever seen a product that's new and improved feature, a lot of times they are trying to extend patent protection on that product. Yes?
So this is back on the idea of the product, not the expression of it?
Yep. Oh, sorry. I thought that was the first half of the question. Ask it again. My bad.
Okay. Wait, is this for the idea of it, the heart rate monitor thing? It's the technology to have that.
Yes.
That specific expression.
It actually protects both. So it protects the idea of a particular method for detecting heartbeats in, your wrist or whatever, and it also protects the physical thing that they put in there.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. The difference between copyrights and patents. You'll hear this phrase a lot, but copyrights are for poems and patents are for mousetraps. Okay, is the sort of thing you will hear that in a lot of different places. It was in this book, but it was also in a bunch of different places. Copyrights are for poems, patents are for mousetraps. So copyrights is creative expressions. Patents are for generally physical objects, although software is also patentable. Software is both patentable and copyrightable. It's kind of an interesting spot. So how is patent protection established? It's established by filing with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And as we discussed, we have a first-to-file system, not a first-to-invent system. So I think it was your question, where if somebody invents something and they don't patent it, and then somebody else comes along and they patent it, they might be able to get a patent on something you invented if you never filed for that patent. It's a little bit complicated. In the United States, it is not a first-to-invent system. We switched to a first-to-file system, about 20 years ago. And so it is now whoever files first on that patent has the exclusive right to that patent. Yes?
For something that's creative, but also a literal object, let's say someone invented a new method of creating lace. Would that be a patent or would that be a copyright?
Yeah, so the question is if it's a creative thing, but it is a method of creating, so a new method of creating lace, which sounds really cool. My guess is patent. Yeah. Yes?
And was it switched first to file because you couldn't prove when you invented it?
It's, yeah, and that people, they're trying to prevent a lot of lawsuits about, you know, that was my idea. I like told my friend at lunch one time about this product, and so now you have to like pay me for the product. Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
it also promote like larger companies filing those patents first? Because like if you're a smaller inventor trying to like raise funding for it, you probably
It does for sure.
go to them.
Yeah, there are some like fee waivers and fee reductions for patents for the Patent and Trademark Office, but you're right for sure that first to file definitely helps larger corporations at the expense of small ones. Yeah. So, how long does protection last? It's 15 to 20 years, and after that it goes into the public domain where anyone can use it. So after the patent protection expires, it goes into the public domain. Anyone can use that product. There are some exceptions. If the USPTO takes a really long time to approve your product or approve your patent, you get it like from the time it's approved, not from the time that you originally filed, because otherwise you like don't have patent protection that whole time. And there are also some pharma exceptions, so drugs can be extended in certain circumstances, but in general, 15 to 20 years protection lasts. As discussed, it's managed by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which is part of the Department of Commerce in the executive branch of the federal government. So, what are the types of patents? There are general, oh yeah, go.
So does that mean that the first iPhone will be in the public domain soon?
So it's a good question. Sort of, but there are lots of individual patents that go into the iPhone. So the iPhone is not just like one thing. There's a big, I think it's Apple and Samsung had a huge fight over whether a square phone with like rounded corners was obvious, or whether it was something that Apple got a patent on like a phone that is the shape that it is. And so for a long time, the like shape of the iPhone, if it's like flat and it's rounded corners, Samsung, they were like fighting with Samsung for like 10 years about that. But in general, yes, at some point those things will become part of the public domain and you can use those, you could create your own versions of them. Yeah. You can't call it an iPhone, but yeah. So 3 types of patents. Utility patents are the most common. These are for 20 years. They protect inventions that you're thinking of, so machines, processes, systems, and drugs. They're by far the most common kind of patent. Most patent apps are probably about utility patents. Design patents protect the design or exterior look of an invention. So the Coca-Cola bottle, the shape of that bottle is patented. The shape of this bottle is almost certainly patented. And so the exact shape of it cannot be copied, although you can like produce a pretty similar bottle. But that would, if there was a patent on this by, you know, POP or whatever, it would expire in 20 years. Or sorry, 15 years. Design patents, 15 years. The third kind of patent, these are much less common, are patents on plants. If you create a new variety of plant by combining 2 previous kinds of plants, or like genetically modifying a plant, you could get a patent on that. These are the least common kinds of patents. There are far fewer of these than the other types, but these are for 20 years. Yes?
Oh, can you try to use that about utility patents?
Yes, no, you're totally fine. I said that they are the most common ones. How long do they last?
15.
Utility patents.
20 years.
20 years. And that they are machines, processes, systems, drugs. They're all utility patents. Yep,
How long does design patent?
15. Yep. But again, the details of this, if you don't remember this, I don't think that's going to be a big deal.
When
Yeah.
you say things like systems, you mean like the assembly line system?
Yeah, things like that.
So would Ford have like a trademark on
At some point, they did have a patent on the assembly line, I believe. Yeah. Yes.
I know that like clothing or like clothing mechanisms can be patented, but that go into design or utility?
I think the physical thing would be a utility patent. The way it looks is a design patent.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So if someone was commissioned to draw a logo and they copyrighted that logo, could someone also get a design patent on the logo?
Probably not. Design patents are more for the physical shape of a physical object.
So the company would then have the copyright on the logo until it expired?
Yeah. Yep.
Considering an example of iPhones again, would there be like, would design patents and utility patents like crossover?
Yeah, the iPhone has like hundreds of patents on it, and they can be both, and they do kind of overlap. Yeah. Yep.
Are patents patents applied internationally?
It's a really good question. I'm gonna sidestep the international question just because I don't we're gonna run out of time here in a second. But we have international agreements that protect copyright and patents internationally, but it requires, in a lot of cases, it's going to require filing for your patent in multiple countries, which is kind of a pain. Yeah. But the United States does not necessarily like that system. We would like our patents to apply everywhere. We would like our copyright and trademarks to apply everywhere as well. All right, so test to establish patentability. In order to get something patented, it has to be useful. Okay? You have to prove that there's like a reason that this thing should exist. It has to be original. You can't patent something that's existed for hundreds of years. Something that's called there's no prior art, meaning that nobody else has done it before. And it has to be non-obvious. It can't just be an obvious combination of previous things. This was the non-obviousness test was the thing that Apple and Samsung were fighting about the shape of the iPhone. Samsung said that it's like super obvious to take like a square or rectangle and like round the corners. And Apple's like, no, that's our invention. Probably, by the way I've described this, you can see which of those I think is maybe more the case. But Apple did, for the most part, win that one. So, what's not patentable? Things that are impossible. You cannot patent a perpetual motion machine, although hundreds of patents have been filed to try and invent a perpetual motion machine. You cannot patent laws of nature or scientific principles. You can't patent gravity, okay? You can't patent the Bernoulli principle. You can't patent math. Just even if you discover something really cool in math, you don't get to patent it. You can't patent mental processes or business methods. If you have just like a cool new way to think about something, not patentable. You can't patent animals, although that's complicated, right? There are patents on plants, but not animals right now. And you can't patent words or phrases. You might be able to trademark them, but you can't patent them. Yes?
Going back to like the iPhone example,
Yep.
does an iOS also be patentable even though it's not?
Yes, it would be patentable as software. Yeah. Yes?
So like, you can make McDonald's I'm loving it.
I'm loving it is trademarked, but it's not patented. That's correct. Yeah. Yes?
So, since iOS has software updates very
Yep.
regularly, does that mean that even the first version of iOS is still patented? Or, I mean, after the 20 years expires, would it still be patented, or is that just the current version?
My understanding, and again, I'm not a patent lawyer, this is really complicated, is that the updates would be patentable, but not the original source code. The original source code would then be in the public domain.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, last one on this one.
This is like more like an answer. Like if it was like a really small update, like this, like some design changes, like the user interface that are really small, would it still be patentable, or would it be like?
Depends on whether the Patent and Trademark Office thinks it's obvious or not. Yeah. If it's an obvious update of an existing thing, maybe not. All right, so problems with the Patent and Trademark Office. These are things that the Act could maybe try and fix. The Patent and Trademark Office is really slow. Okay, it is very, very, very slow. It takes a very long time from the time you file a patent until you are granted that patent. It can be inconsistent and results are uncertain. Okay, there are literal people making these decisions, and those people don't, they obviously have guidelines, there are regulations, there are descriptions of what should be allowed and what's not, but it's not always perfect. It's not a perfect process. Anyone can challenge a patent, which slows things down further. So about 20 years ago, we added the ability to, after a patent is granted, to go back and say that patent shouldn't have been granted. That can slow things down further because then now another company gets to challenge your existing patent. The Patent and Trademark Office, interestingly, is not funded by Congress. It actually makes money. It is a fee-based organization in the federal government where they take in fees from when you file for a patent. You have to pay a fee, and that funds the Patent and Trademark Office. The problem with that is that Congress kind of raids their money, not that infrequently, and so that can slow things down further. It is hard for small entities to get patents. I think that was your comment, and it was a good one. That our first to file system, or just patent system in general, can make it really difficult for smaller entities to get patents. It's really time consuming. They have to have lawyers. They have to do a ton of research. It's hard to do that. And then literally, the Patent and Trademark Office itself got new software in 2023. When I was researching problems with the Patent and Trademark Office, there were a million articles that was just their software is buggy, okay? They're literal, file for a patent website goes down all the time. And a bunch of people think that we jumped the gun on that one. So if you read the IRS DISAD last year, there might be a similar argument and perhaps similar quality USPTO disadvantage that talks about the inefficiency of the Patent and Trademark Office and adding more things to it, slowing things down further. So, one of the things that's really interesting is that the debate about patents can go in either direction. Okay, whether the idea of patents is to encourage innovation, and we're going to talk in a second about these arguments to encourage innovation. But there are an equally large set of arguments that patents discourage innovation. And so many AF advantages this year are going to be about innovation. The AF's going to say, you know, we increase patents, and that's going to cause innovation in this field, whether that's pharmaceuticals or technology or software or whatever. And there is another set of arguments that says that increasing patent protection would reduce innovation. So arguments for patents encourage innovation. It rewards first movers. That means that it rewards people who try things out in a field that they're not sure is going to work. Okay? They like do research on a new drug that they're not sure it's going to work, but if they get that drug and it works, then they get the patent on it, and so that's really cool. Another one is that you can use the returns on your previous patents to fund future innovation. This is an argument that the pharmaceutical industry makes a lot. There are a lot of people who think that this argument is just like not true, like it is factually incorrect. But the pharmaceutical industry will argue all the time that they need their patent protection in order to fund research on a new drug. So we need patent protection on, you know, Paxlovid to fund our research into next generation cancer drugs or next generation COVID drugs or whatever. And that's what we need the money for. Another one is it just sort of gives you an incentive. The build a better mousetrap is a phrase you're going to see a lot of times this year. But the idea is, you know, you just kind of need an incentive to try and create a better version of something that already exists. If there was no patents, we'd probably stick with the like original mousetrap that's like kind of sad and like kills them. Not that great. But if there is patent protection to like build a more humane mousetrap, then maybe you're going to try and do that. The flip side of that is that patents might discourage innovation, or they might not encourage innovation, or they might literally, like there are link turn arguments to all of these patent arguments. One is this argument about patent thickets. Okay, a patent thicket is when you can't innovate because there are too many overlapping patents in an area. The patents have been granted to too many different companies, and they like kind of overlap, and you can't even figure out who you're supposed to pay, and so people just don't bother to innovate. The question about the iPhone, there are like hundreds of patents on an iPhone. If you wanted to invent a new iPhone, you probably would not do so just because of how difficult it would be to figure out like who you need to pay and for what. Another argument is called the tragedy of the anti-commons. And the idea there is just like too many things are owned by private people. And so it means the transaction cost to even figure out if something is patented is too high. Okay, maybe something's not patented, but the cost to figure that out is very time consuming in terms of money, and it's very time consuming in terms of time. And so people just like, it's too risky, it's too expensive, they don't want to get sued, they just don't create a new thing. There's a 2012 paper that Boldrin and Levine, you don't need to write that down, but it was like a very long meta-study of the relationship of patents and innovation, and they basically determined that there is strong evidence that patents reduce innovation, not increase it, with some possible exceptions for fields like pharmaceuticals. But that overall they found that patents reduce innovation. Who's ever heard of a patent troll? What's a patent troll? Yeah?
Someone who, like, normally they buy patents from someone who's not using them, and then when someone else uses that item or sells it or whatever, even if it's like really obvious, they'll go like threaten to sue them, but normally the other people just settle because they don't want to go into it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So patent trolls is a colloquial term for what is known as a non-practicing entity, or an NPE, non-practicing entity. And those are corporations or individuals that buy patents not to make the product. They're not intending to ever make the product. They just want to sue people who infringe the patent. And so the society never gets the benefit from the patent because the product is not made. They are just trying to make money on the existence of the patents. And there are actually lawyers who just specialize in this. There are entire finance companies that just finance patent suits. And that is what they do with no benefit to innovation because the product is not actually being made. Yeah?
What's this study called about the...
Oh yeah, Boldrin, B-O-L-D-R-I-N, and Levine, L-E-V-I-N-E in 2012. I don't have the title, but you'll find it pretty quickly. So as we discussed, lots of tech innovation, lots of tech buyouts are big companies buying small companies to get their patents. Small companies can be shut out of the patent process. It can be too expensive for them to participate. Litigation costs can swamp the benefit of innovation. So like, yes, there's a benefit to innovation, but it is overwhelmed by the cost of litigation in the area. And then it can raise costs on existing products. You're paying more. Every time you buy a drink at Starbucks and you get a cup, you are paying a little bit more because Starbucks has like a patent on how they make their cups. They also have a patent on their sleeve. If you ever used like the little like cardboard sleeve, and it's like got those little bubble things, they have a patent on that. And so you're paying like just a little bit more for that coffee because of that patent. The like lawyers to pay to enforce that patent. How you feel about that depends on how you feel about a lot. All right, so initial patent app ideas, there's a bunch of them. There's a whole set of apps that's just like we should have stronger patents in a particular field, and those will be popular. We should have stronger patents in the area of green technology. We should have stronger patents in the area of plants. We should allow people to patent animals. Those are all app ideas. But there's also, we could have specialized patent courts. One of the things that's interesting about the United States compared to Europe and some other places is that we don't have specialized patent courts. The patent suits are heard by judges who are not necessarily experts in the field, and so maybe it would be better if we had experts in the field hear it. They might enforce patent protection more strongly or more effectively. You can limit inter partes reviews to the Patent Trademark Appeal Board so that they can, that's the thing where I talked about how anyone can challenge a patent after it's been issued. You could limit people's ability to challenge patents after they've been issued. Again, you could expand patent eligibility in a particular area, AI and DNA. You could fast track suits, okay? Patent lawsuits take like a decade. A lot of times, and then they'll get appealed and then they take like another decade. The only people who are benefiting there are the lawyers, so you could fast track these suits. You can implement fee shifting. The argument there is if you sue somebody and for violating your patent and you lose, you have to pay for their legal fees. The idea there would be that it would discourage infringing because you would not want to pay the legal fees of the company that you infringed on, and it would discourage low-level infringement suits because, again, you would not want to pay the legal fees if you lose. And then you could shift back to a first-to-invent system. There are some people who say that a first-to-file system is kind of inefficient. All right, we're going to talk about trademarks. We're going to talk about trademarks the most quickly, not because we are running out of time, a little, but mostly because it is the least fertile area of the resolution in terms of debate. And the way that debate works, where we, like a lot of times people go for big impacts, trademarks, there are a few trademark ideas for affirmatives, but I think that this will be the smallest area of the resolution by far. So, a trademark is a type of IP that protects a brand by distinguishing it from others. So this is not to encourage people to invent things. It is not to encourage creating things. It is instead just to protect a brand's reputation and name and consistency. So a logo is trademarked. A design is trademarked. The smell in a store is trademarked. I believe Apple has protection on the smell in Apple stores. A lot of big brands have trademarks on the sound in their stores, and those are things that you are supposed to associate with a product. So it does not prevent other companies from creating a competing product. I can create Pepsi. I mean, I can't create Pepsi because I don't own Pepsi, but I could create a third type of cola that is not Coke or Pepsi, but I can't call it Coke and I can't call it Pepsi. Yeah?
Aren't there people that have trademarked colors and that kind of stuff?
Yes, yeah. The different colors are trademarked in different areas. If I were to make a cola bottle, I probably would not want the label to be the same color of red as Coke. That would be almost certainly a trademark infringement. Yes? Can you say that louder?
Our brand logo is copyrighted, trademarked.
Logos are trademarked. Yes?
Can trademarks be market specific?
Yes, they can be market specific. So there are companies that the company name is used in 2 different fields. So I don't know, Woodward Academy owns a trademark on the phrase Woodward Academy, but really only in the education space. If I wanted to create Woodward Nuts and Bolts Company, then probably Woodward Academy cannot sue me for that because it is not likely to be confused. Yes. So how is trademark protection established? The right is created the moment you use the mark in commerce. So the minute you start selling something with a particular design, your trademark is created. You do have to register, like copyrights, you have to register it in order to defend it. How long does the protection last? Well, You have to keep it active in order to have it, but it can theoretically last forever. So if you keep using it in commerce and you keep using it for your, if you keep using it in like selling the product and you keep using that brand consistently, you can keep it forever. There are examples of times where something has become genericized, which means that it's become the word for all of the things, and companies really don't want that to happen. So who's ever used a facial, like a store brand facial tissue and called it a Kleenex? You like ask somebody to pass you a Kleenex, okay? Kleenex company is thumbs down on that. They like really want you to buy Kleenex, but they don't want you to call facial tissue Kleenex. And the reason for that is because otherwise people could start selling facial tissue as Kleenex. Okay, and so you will notice if you ever see a Kleenex ad, they will say Kleenex brand facial tissue. Okay, they will not say give me a Kleenex because they do not want other companies to be able to start using Kleenex, and so they will emphatically call it a facial tissue. The same thing happened with copy machines. Who's ever heard of a copy machine called something? This might be too old. Does anybody know the big brand name in copy machines? Xerox machine, that's exactly right. So Xerox was very, very worried about losing access to their trademark over copy machines because they were very concerned that people were starting to call them Xeroxes. And so they actually put out an ad campaign that's like, don't call it a Xerox. If you have a non-Xerox copy machine, just call it copying, not Xeroxing. That's exactly right. Who is anyone here a fan of the baseball team, the Guardians? No? We have no Guardians fans? Okay. Does anybody know what the Guardians were called before they were the Guardians? Okay, that's correct. So the previous name of the Guardians was the Cleveland Indians. Okay, they have continued. This is like a super interesting trademark case, but they have like moved away from the name of the Indians. They have decided that that was like extremely problematic for a lot of really good reasons. They no longer call themselves the Indians. They no longer want to use the logo. What does anybody know the name of the guy? Like their name of their mascot, their previous mascot? Okay, Chief Wahoo is the name of the mascot. They no longer want that to be their brand, okay? But they also don't want anyone else to get to start using that trademark. Does that make sense to you all? They don't want you to be able to start producing former Cleveland team name brand items. And so there is like a single spot where you can go to the Cleveland Stadium and still buy stuff with that old logo, which they have decided is racist on it. Not because they necessarily want to keep selling it, but because they don't want other people to be able to sell it. And as soon as they stop selling stuff with it, then their trademark expires and they don't get to use those anymore. Oh, that should say trademarks right there. Who's in charge of trademarks? The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. There's not really a global system for trademarks. You do have to file those in every single country. So, initial trademark AF ideas. I don't have a lot of them. I will fess up here. As of like noon yesterday, this slide just had a bunch of question marks on it because I had not done enough thinking about this. But I don't think there are going to be a ton of trademark AFs. The ones we do have, I think there's going to be one to hold third-party sellables liable for counterfeit goods sales. There's a pretty good court case on that that's pretty interesting that says that if you knowingly sell something that's counterfeit good, then you are liable for it, not just the person who produced that. So that is a lot of shady websites that sell like obvious knockoff goods would be liable for trademark violations. Yeah?
So like, does that include like stuff that's copyrighted, like so like pirating sites, or like this is a question in general, is the person that downloads something that's pirated off of a pirate website, like a movie, like if I download a movie off of a pirated website, would I be liable for downloading
You
that?
would, and the person who reproduced it would be, yeah. There's definitely some stuff with cultural appropriation in trademarks. Appropriating traditional designs and making those in commerce is a big issue. There's also indigenous appropriation, both based on trademarking, like identifiable goods and services, and also the logos and those kinds of things that deliberately use indigenous works. So there's definitely something here. Haven't really figured out what the AF would be yet. All right, we're going to quickly talk about the separation of powers and the politics of intellectual property. So first, we got our three branches of government. All are involved in intellectual property. Okay, Congress writes the laws. Recent big one, 2011, switched from first to invent to first to file. And they also added the post-grant review process. I said 20 years ago. 2011 was not 20 years ago, 13 years ago. But that was called the Leahy-Smith America Invents Act in 2011 that did a big overhaul of how we do patents. That's an example of the legislative process. The executive branch issues regulations that interpret our existing laws. So they get to clarify, for example, eligibility for patent applications. Congress can then be like, no, we didn't mean that if they want to. But a lot of the work is actually done by the Patent and Trademark Officer, so the Copyright Office. Remember, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for Patents and Trademark is in the Department of Commerce. Copyright Office is in the Library of Congress. This one's very big. This one's not very big at all. The judicial branch also gets involved. So they get to interpret individual cases. So they interpret existing laws through individual court cases. Those court cases, if you are suing about a patent, that starts in the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. It then gets appealed to a district court. It could theoretically get appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. Not very likely. Okay, the Supreme Court takes a patent case like every 3 or 4 years, something like that. But the ones they do take are big, like this Alice Corp versus CLS Bank established the patentability of software. Prior to that, software was not patentable. And so the court gets to decide those big ones. So Supreme Court IP decision only every few years, but it tends to be a big one. In debate, lots of times the AF will have the court do things because we get to fiat that the court does things that they would not do. But yes, in real world, almost certainly stops at the district court. Yeah? The executive branch is also enforcing the laws. That's exactly right. So again, the Patent and Trademark Office does not get federal funding. Congress actually takes about 10% of their funding from them on a pretty regular basis. And the Copyright Office is part of the Library of Congress, headed by the Register of Copyrights. All right, so politics. This is a big area for political disputes because we're talking about big corporations and they're having agreements and disagreements and they're trying to figure things out. We spend about $700 million in IP lobbying annually. When I say we, I didn't mean like me. I do not spend $700 million in IP lobbying annually. $700 million is spent by corporations in lobbying Congress about intellectual property every year. And there are about 400 companies actually engaged in lobbying on an annual basis. The biggest ones, we got our entertainment ones like Comcast and Intel and the Software Alliance. We have our drug companies. Pharma is the group that organizes on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry. It's the Pharmaceutical Industry Lobbying Group. Same thing with the Biotechnology Industry Organization. And then Amgen and AstraZeneca are both individual companies that lobby on behalf of those, like they have lobbyists themselves. Alphabet, what's Alphabet? Google, okay? That's the #1 IP-related lobby as of a few years ago. That was not super up to date. This is a chart of the top 48 federal lobby clients into the Patent and Trademark, Copyright Patent and Trademark in 2015. You do not need to write this down. The thing that I want you to understand, though, is there's like a lot of overlap between these tech companies and the pharmaceutical companies and the both companies. Okay, if you're a pharmaceutical company right now, you probably care about tech and you probably care about pharmaceuticals. And a lot of these companies are involved. They're like, all of these drug companies are also part of pharma. These drug companies are also part of pharma. These drug companies are also part of the App Dev Alliance. The idea is that they are all interrelated and they are all giving money to Congress to try and get what they want. What do they want? It depends on the law, okay? There is not a consistent, as we talked about at the very beginning, there's not like this company like always wants this, because in different spots they want different things. And this is a huge deal right now in AI, where companies are trying to figure out how they feel about AI, and it's not totally clear. So, negative arguments. Here are some of the biggies that I think will make it into both the packet here at Emory and into this year's topic. One is the debate that we talked about already, the innovation link terms. The AF reads it innovation advantage. The neg is almost certainly going to say you do not increase innovation, you decrease innovation. Your strengthening of IP protection does not improve innovation, it reduces it. Politics DA, it's a thing. Companies care a lot about these things because it's a big part of their bottom line, and so they would like to spend money to advocate for their constituency, not like the people, but their corporation, and they do that in Congress. We talked a little bit about capitalism, but I think it underlies the whole thing. The idea of a property right is a capitalist concept. The idea of an intellectual property right is like an even more like leaning into the concept of capitalism. And so certainly there will be lots of capitalism debates on this topic. There will be counter plans based on the separation of powers. If your plan uses Congress, or can be reasonably assumed to use Congress, maybe the Supreme Court would be a better mechanism for that. If your plan uses the courts, maybe the executive branch, and just have the Patent and Trademark Office determine something rather than going through the court to establish that eligibility. There are a lot of other process counterplans. All of these processes can be tweaked. We talked about first to file versus first to invent, but there's a ton of different ways that an extremely bureaucratic process can be modified in order to create possibilities for counterplans and disadvantages. Every time you increase protection of intellectual property, you also increase lawsuits, okay? Because there's now somebody else who gets to sue somebody else for that thing. And so a court clog disadvantage, meaning you have overstretched the courts. They no longer have the ability to do what they're supposed to do because they are all smooshed up with all these patent cases or trademark cases or copyright cases is a disadvantage. And then finally, there are disadvantages based on the different industries. So if you are reading an AI app, there's almost certainly an AI industry DA that you help or hurt the AI industry. If you are reading a drugs app, there's almost certainly you either help or hurt the drugs industry or the pharmaceutical industry, and there is a disadvantage based on all of those things. So those are kind of the aff and neg biggies. There's going to be a lot more, but those are the sort of generic. All right, time for any last questions. I've been doing questions as we go, but if you have further pressing questions that you want to ask now rather than in lab, bring it. Yeah?
Could you explain what like the passive DNA would look like?
Yeah, so whether DNA innovation, so if I like tweak DNA or if I use CRISPR technology to like create a DNA, like a new snippet of DNA that can be inserted into people, whether you can patent that and how much it can be patented is debatable. And there are certainly corporations, who think that it should be more patentable than it is now. Yeah, good question. Yep.
So basically today's topic is basically affirming for a change of patent laws. Then would the app be able to define what changes should be made?
Yes. The app is going to pick probably one of these three. Technically, it could be more than one if you're writing a software app. It's like probably both copyrights and patents. But almost certainly the app is going to pick a specific example of the way the federal government should strengthen protection. They're not just going to say we should strengthen protection across the board. They're going to say we should strengthen protection this particular way. And that's when they read a plan, they are choosing how to, the plan is going to choose how they're going to represent that resolution. Good question. Yes?
Are the slides like, are you sent straight to our email? Or
Can you, I'm sorry, I just can't hear you.
Can you send straight to our email or is it on the website?
Oh, I think it'll probably be on the website. I don't know. I'll send it out a whole bunch of different ways to make sure people have access to it. But we'll make sure people have access. I'll send it to all your lab leaders too as soon as we finish this. It's a publicly shareable link, so you can share it with other people. Feel free. Strongly encourage. Yes? Oh, did you have a question? No?
Yeah. How can they overlap? Like if Pixar's image with the lamp is trademarked, if they were to like design an animation with the lamp, would that ever go into public domain since the lamp is in the logo, which is trademarked?
It's a good question. I don't super know the answer to that. I think it would eventually expire, but I don't know how that would work. Any other questions? Yeah?
At the very beginning, before you left different types of property, could you go over excludable versus non-excludable again? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, so excludable property and it's a scale. All of these things are a sliding scale. Don't think of it as like the 4 quadrants thing. I like read a kind of interesting article that was like, this is totally wrong. It's really like a graph. You need to make a graph in both directions, like a scatter plot kind of thing. But the idea is, how easy is it to prevent others from having access to this good? So I cannot prevent you from breathing air. No one can really prevent you from breathing that air. I mean, like some gruesome ways, but like in general, you breathing the air is not super preventable. You having access to national defense, we can't say like, all right, national defense applies to everybody except Becca. Becca doesn't get nationally defended, okay? Because national defense, like you can't just like exclude one person from national defense like that. And so the idea is like, how easy or difficult is it to prevent others from using that good? Yeah, absolutely. Last question? All right, thank you all for your patience. I really appreciate it. It is a pleasure to get to talk to you, and it'll be a pleasure to get to work with you all over the rest of the Institute. Have a good one.